Yes, yes, yes. Oh, you know what that sound means. Time for Independent F1, Greeny and the Cheese. Oh, we got a. This ain't no In the News special. This is a special episode. That's right. We got the author to Speed, the history of Formula One, on the program today, boys and girls. And what else is going on today? It's Indigenous Peoples Day here in the States. Oh yeah, for our friends up north. It's Canadian Thanksgiving, Michael. Did you know that? Let's get some turkey, some taters, some stuffing. Let's get it on.
I only knew that because you told me, and I will be in Canada in like 48 hours as well. So goes to show how much I know about the country I'll be visiting in the next couple days here.
Yes, and as always, we are caffeinated and we are medicated. We got a humdinger for you today, boys and girls.
Humdinger, sir. We got the author. Award-winning journalist Kevin Eason is going to jump on to promote his new book, Speed, the history of Formula One World Championships. I'm going to gush about the book for a second here, and I know I don't usually, just gush about other people's works, but it's fantastic. Kevin will be on momentarily here. But the book is absolutely fantastic. It's like the history of Formula One. It's big. It's beautiful. For those of you not watching and only listening, it's a heavy book, man. I got this mailed over. Thanks to the folks over at HarperCollins over in the UK for sending it over. This like 8-pound book over to us. That is just a gorgeous, as we say in the States, coffee table book.
Yes.
Do they do coffee tables anywhere else? Are there coffee tables anywhere else? Anyway. I don't know if it's like just an American thing. Listen, right behind me over my right shoulder, if you're watching, there it is. We're going to be giving away an original 1967 Grand Prix of the United States poster from the event. It's pretty good condition. So take a look there. If you can check it out on YouTube. It's free. All you have to do is email inthepaddock.usa at gmail.com, inthepaddock.usa@gmail.com. Subject: Raffle 2024. You'll be entered to win. Also, if you typed in 2024 raffle, you're also eligible to win. We won't discriminate. So go ahead, send those entries in. They're only good until Lights Out at Austin, which is coming up in like only 6 days. So get those emails in right now. It's an email. It's free. It's free to enter. It's free stuff if you win. So go ahead and get that done. And without further ado, sir. All right, we are here with Kevin Eason, who's taken some time off. I'm sure a busy whirlwind book tour already. But Kevin Eason is an award-winning journalist who covered close to 300 Grand Prix during his time as motor racing correspondent for the Times over in UK. In 2012, he was nominated UK Sports Journalist of the Year for his reporting on the crisis in Bahrain at the GP that year. Kevin received the Lorenzo Bandini Gold Medal for his contributions to Formula One journalism. His book, Speed, the history of Formula One World Championship, will be out very soon, within 10 days. I believe October 24th is the date, and we are so glad to have Kevin with us today.
Yes, America's switched on to Formula One finally. You're finally getting it.
Finally.
We did do our best to mess it up, as I remember. If you remember 2005, you remember the infamous race with 6 cars.
Yes, in Indianapolis, of course, yes.
Yeah.
But with the tire debacle.
Oh yes, I remember it well, and I remember being in a bar after the race in Indianapolis, and we had to go and hide. I thought we were going to get lynched. It was terrifying. But we probably deserved it.
But listen, U.S. racing and Formula One has come a long way now with 3 races, as everyone knows.
Yeah, it has now, hasn't it? And it does look spectacular. The thing about Formula One is really a TV event. I mean, it's great being there, but really for most people, it'll always be a TV event. And it does look really good these days. I particularly like the one that's coming up in Austin. I think that's a fantastic track. Absolutely.
I love the layout of Austin.
Yeah, it's good. It was a wonderful track.
Well, let's get myself, being an American, I actually started watching Formula One, I'd say, going back to like the 88 Monaco Grand Prix when it was on the Wide World of Sports on ABC. That was my first taste of it and kind of got me hooked at like 8 years old. where or what was it for you that led you into Formula One and then leading on to wanting to do this book later on?
Well, mainly because a nice man at the Times gave me the job. This will surprise this will surprise you, but for many years I had a proper job. I was a political and industrial correspondent. So my daily beat was unions, politicians, big companies, all of that stuff. But and it's a long story, and I won't bore you with it. But for some reason, I was picked out also to write about cars, which came as a surprise to me. And I became known as the car guy somehow. So when Senna crashed, I was kind of involved in that. And then in '97, I was actually on the general election coverage here, and then the death of Princess Diana. And after I'd done that gig, I didn't really have anything to do. And the next thing I knew, I got a call from the sports editor who said, "Come and be the motor racing correspondent." So that was me on the road in March 1998 to Australia. And that's where, I mean, I've always been a sports nut. I've always followed Formula One, going right back to when I do have Skelestric in America, you know, the little cars on a track.
Yes.
Sure, yeah.
Yes,
track.
absolutely.
Well, I had one of those when I was, I don't know, 8, 9 years old and that sort of stuff. But the joy of doing this job, I mean, it's been such a privilege because, I was up close and personal with it. So I met all of the great characters. I stood on the tracks with the cars. I stood in Monza where you stand 3-4 feet from the car when it's in the old days when we had the V10s, when they were revving 16,000 RPM and then bang down the track. So I got very kind of involved with the sport and the characters in it. But then I kind of retired at the end of 2016 because the travel was just, because I wasn't just doing Formula One. I did 3 Olympics and the Soccer World Cup in 2010 and cycling and Wimbledon and the Open and the Ryder Cup.
Wow.
So my years were becoming so full that there was no time for anything else. So I sort of semi-retired, worked part-time for the Times and started writing books. So I'm on number 4 now. So there's a few up here. So that's how it came about. And then HarperCollins came up with this idea of doing the history and gave me a call and said, "Can you remember anything?" And I said, "No." But research is a wonderful thing. So all these books here have been my font of knowledge for the past 6 months or so. And fascinating to remember, some of the years I could barely believe what I was writing, particularly in those very early days when, death was a constant. I find it astonishing now that it was tolerated even for a second. In fact, Enzo Ferrari was called out by the Catholic Church. I mean, they called him Satan because so many Ferrari drivers were killed on his watch, and not just in F1, but in sports cars and in other areas. And also, I was able to remember some of the great rivalries and some of the great drivers, and some of the races I've seen I've forgotten all about. So it's been a fascinating journey for me. Actually, it really has.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've covered so many races. Kevin, anything that stood out, any moment when you were covering live at racetracks where you just turned around or looked around and said, I'm just in complete awe that I have this job, that I'm able to do this professionally. Any moments stand out to you in all the years you were covering races?
Too many to mention, probably. And yes, you're right. It was if you go to an American football game, you don't get to go on the pitch, do you? But I got to go on the track. I got to stand in the pits or in the garages. So I was, within touching distance of the cars. But I was thinking about it this morning, actually. There was one memory because the season really starts with the pre-season tests.
Right.
And they used to be in Spain. They're now in the Middle East, but in these days they were in Spain. And we were down in Jerez, which is down right at the bottom of Spain.
Right.
And I always remember, it was a beautiful day, and it's when we had the old V10s, and I don't know whether you.
I miss that sound very much. Very
well.
Much.
We were driving in the early morning, to the very first day of the first test of the year, so it would be the end of January. And we had one of the windows open because it was such a beautiful day. And we could hear the very first couple of cars start up. And we must have been, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 miles away, perhaps.
Wow.
You could hear that V10 scream
Yeah.
absolutely so clearly. And it was just thrilling. You just thought, blimey, that's where I'm going. And I very often think about that one moment of realization that, in the years that I did it, the technology came in leaps and bounds, absolute leaps and bounds. But those V10s, they were so thrilling.
Well, you touched it. You touched on it there for a second. There's been plenty of triumphs in Formula One, but there's also been the tragedies. Where do you think was the tipping point that Formula One said, okay, we got to get this under control? Would it be, my thought would have been probably 94 with Senna?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. That was when the will to change was overwhelming because it was such a public death.
Yes,
as I say in the book, it was in front of a live audience, and I think everybody kind of remembers that day, the way it played.
I remember it. Absolutely, I remember that.
Max Mosley, who was then president of the FIA, I mean, he was on the case very, very quickly, and there was a whole raft of reforms from there on. Because I always remember I'm quite close to Jackie Stewart. I've known Jackie for a long time, and again in the book, he quit because he said Formula One wasn't a sport; it was more like war. Because he saw so many friends and colleagues killed, and it drove him out of the sport. And he tried very hard to implement some measures of change, but the tracks wouldn't have it, and the governing body wouldn't have it, and even the drivers were against it. We're going back to the days when some drivers would refuse to wear seatbelts because they'd rather be thrown out of the car,
right,
than be in the inferno, which it would be when it crashed, because once the petrol tank burst. And Max Mosley, who coincidentally was a driver in the race at Hockenheim in which Jim Clark died, so he saw at first hand, what happened. And he said, it was madness because we were driving high-speed bombs. He was sitting in this fragile chassis surrounded by petrol. Right. So if anything went wrong, bang, it went. It was a bomb. So Max was very aware when he took over at the FIA, and he'd only been in post, I think, 2 years probably when Senna died. And, bless his cotton socks, he's no longer with us. But, he really did take on the challenge. And now, that the idea that a driver would have a crash and not walk away is unimaginable. Absolutely unimaginable.
Yeah.
And of course, the latest thing that we had was the Halo, which was a result partially of 2 British drivers who died in America, Dan Weldon and Justin Wilson.
Yes.
Both sustained head injuries, and that helped propel the idea of the Halo, which has been very, very effective. So, so many changes.
I'm going to switch gears here for a second. Kevin, you've traveled all over the world, and Formula One is a global sport. And I had mentioned in the intro there the 2012 Bahrain GP, which really was a crazy event as far as what was going on politically or what was going on in Bahrain at the time. You were there. What was it like being there? And I believe it was canceled. 2011 was canceled because of the unrest. And now you get into 2012 where you're holding an event, and under these conditions, what was it like to be there? What were your feelings on it? What did the field look like? And as far as everyone else in Formula One, how were they feeling about being there in 2012 in Bahrain?
If I said it was febrile, it would be a tremendous understatement, because the 2011 race was cancelled because of the Arab Spring, and I can't remember, but I think there were 80 deaths in Bahrain during the crackdown. But for whatever reason, the Bahrainis were very anxious to get the race on. But the Bahraini people certainly weren't. And there were mass protests. And in fact, I did go to some of the protests, but I spent one night with protesters who ferried me around. I went to one of the villages where there was a very dignified protest, actually, mainly women and children. But there was one old man, actually, I don't know where they are, but there was one old man who he took me around the streets and we collected tear gas bullets, canisters, and rubber bullets, which I've got somewhere in this shambles of a room, which made it very real. And then later that night, we were chasing through the streets of Manama, the capital, being chased by tear gas, and we ended up hiding on the roof of a house. So it was a very real experience for me. And of course, when we got to the race, it was almost like a war zone. And there were tanks everywhere, police, soldiers, armed soldiers. It was a race under martial law, effectively. And one of the teams, Force India, had been almost firebombed on their way back from the track. And a couple of the team members actually just got on a plane and went home. So that the atmosphere was very, very, very shaky indeed. And Mr. Eccleston, I don't know whether people can remember Bernie Eccleston, who was the ruler of Formula One at the time. He and I fell out, I think. I think you would say, over this, because I was quite vocal about it. And I remember there was a press conference on a Friday afternoon, an impromptu press conference with the Crown Prince of Bahrain in the paddock. And right at the end of it, Bernie took the sleeve of the Crown Prince and turned him round and pointed at me and he said, "That's the man, Eason of the Times." So I thought, oh, I'm a marked man. This is terrible. And the Crown Prince came over and had a few words, but our relationship recovered. Bernie and I, despite our many differences, we got on quite well. I still speak to him. In fact, I spoke to him a few weeks ago. Quite a character.
Yes, definitely. Bernie was definitely a character.
Yeah, yes, he was a one-man variety show all on his own. He was extra. Well, all the characters, because I was working in a time when really it was the great entrepreneurs who were running the sport. So Ron Dennis at McLaren, Frank Williams, Eddie Jordan, all these guys who were self-made. Bernie, of course, self-made, started fixing motorcycles in his mother's kitchen, ended up as a billionaire. And he was just the most extraordinary character. Not all bad, as people seem to think. He's given away, and he will never talk about it, but he's given away tens of millions of pounds to charity. People don't actually know how much, but it's huge amounts. But he kept us all on our toes. Whenever he rang me, if he was upset about something, he would start the conversation with, "Do you want to talk to me or my lawyer?" every conversation started with that. It was the veiled threat before we started. He could be very, very amusing. Very
Sorry, Kevin. I get the same line from my wife all the time, so it's
Yes, so be careful. It can be expensive. I know. I've been through it.
That's what they say, right?
Yeah.
Well, incredible. Listen, incredible stuff, and hopefully you and Bernie. I'm glad you guys are on speaking terms again. So it's
Oh yes. We get on very, very well. In fact, I went to when he quit the sport. There was a big party for him, and he invited me, and it was great. It was great, not being involved with work. But I will tell you one story. When he finished, he had this office in Kensington. It's one of the poshest parts of London and most expensive. And Bernie actually owns quite a lot of property in Belgravia, Kensington, and Chelsea. One of the reasons why he's very rich. And he called up and said, "I want you to come in." So I go into the office. And he'd cleaned out his office. Everything was in boxes. And he said, "Look at this." He said, 40 years. It's all in boxes. It's all going. I'm getting rid of everything. He said, "But there's one thing I want to show you." He took me by the hand and took me into this little back room. And on it, inside the room on the wall, was an enormous sort of washing machine thing. It had a big green button and a red button. And I looked at it and I said, "I know you've quit work, but you can't be that poor that you're taking in laundry." He said, "No, it's better than that, mate." He opened the door. He said, "You throw the money in there and you press the green button, money laundering." I said, "Bernie, whatever you do do not tell the tax man, because he won't see the joke. And actually, the tax man didn't, and he ended up paying 600 million to the tax man here. So,
Oh, jeez.
he had a terrible sense of humor. It was frightening.
Kids at home, don't put your money in the washing machine on purpose, as well as don't tell anyone you're laundering money. Oh, probably a good idea. Probably a good idea.
I want to change gears a little bit. Let's go to this current season, 2024. Been a very interesting season. Now, after doing all of your research, going back to the archives through the history, is there a season that would jump out to you to compare to this season?
Don't know. We've had quite a few close shaves over the years. I was surprised at how many seasons actually ended with kind of 1 or 2 points.
Yeah,
in it at the end. Michael Schumacher went through a whole run of 1 and 2 pointers and not quite making it. 98. He came from McLaren's absolutely dominated. They lapped the entire field at the first race in Australia and were completely dominant. But within about 3-4 races, Michael was on them, and through sheer persistence, caught them up and went to the last race in Japan. Could have won it. Got pole, but stalled the car at the start and then got a puncture, and it kind of Mika Häkkinen then took it. But he came from a long way back. There's been quite a few seasons like that have been extremely close. I think the intriguing thing about this is the sudden turnaround in McLaren's fortunes. I mean, they really have just come from nowhere, and then the sudden decline in Red Bull's fortunes.
Yeah.
And there are a million theories around about what actually has happened. And in Red Bull's case, it's the loss of Adrian Newey, of course. But it is odd the way it suddenly flipped.
Completely flipped.
I don't think Lando will win it. I don't think there's enough breathing space, because there's one thing about Max is even if the car's duff, he'll still get the best out of it. So
yeah,
I think actually the power players between now and the end of the season could be Ferrari, because if they can get in the mix, they could determine how many points both Lando and Max are going to get.
Right.
But Lando needs to win 3 or 4 times, and he needs Max not to finish a couple of times, I think. So I don't know. It's intriguing. What looked as though it would be another walkover has suddenly become an intriguing season. So
absolutely.
Just see what turns out. Yeah. And this next weekend will be an interesting one. Should be good for McLaren in theory, but we shall see.
Absolutely. It has been a heck of a season this year. And listen, the book, Speed, the history of a Formula One championships, you should get it. Get it as soon as it comes out, because this is you're gonna want to put this on your coffee table. You're gonna want to give this as a Christmas present or a holiday present. You want to give it to the Formula One fan in your life. I'm not kidding when I say this. This is a gorgeous book. Kevin, you did an absolutely amazing job. Thank you so much for coming on and taking the time today.
Thank you so much, Kevin.
Appreciate it.
All right, my pleasure. Nice to talk to America.
Thank you, Kevin.
Appreciate it, Kevin.
Great to talk to you.
Good luck with the election.
Oh, thank you. You might be moving to the other side of the pond much quicker than you think. We might be doing this show next year in the UK. So
I don't know. You want to come in here? We've got as many problems as you have. Believe me. Lovely to talk to you. Thanks, guys.
Amazing, Kevin. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.